Hello everyone, welcome to ACE Engineering College YouTube live session. Myself Dr. Prem Kumar, faculty of ACE Engineering College. In today's session, we are going to discuss about requirements engineering. So what's the importance of requirements engineering? The importance of requirements engineering in today's session, which we are going to discuss, the importance of requirements engineering is, which is going to establish the what are the services where the clients expecting from the software system that can be established, that is in the form of requirements engineering. What are the various requirements required for development of software system, which we are going to discuss. There are various types of requirements: user requirements, functional requirements, non-functional requirements, system requirements, domain requirements. About various types of requirements which we are going to discuss in today's session. The requirements engineering, the process of establishing the services that the customers requires from a system and the constraints under which it operates and is developed. So the purpose of requirements engineering, which is going to establish the services that the customer expecting from the developed software system. Let's take, here is the client, this is the software system, right? What are the services where client is expecting from this particular software system? The request is passed by the software system and responses will be prepared, responses in the form of service back to the client. So about this client requirements, that is in the form of services, can be established by this requirements engineering. That is what the importance of requirements engineering. Requirements may range from level of abstract statement of services or a system to a detailed mathematical functional notation. So requirements can be from high level abstract statements of a service or a system to a detailed mathematical functional specification. Requirements can be specified, that is in the form of mathematical notations, mathematical functional specifications. There are high level abstract statements. This is what exactly the requirements. We are going to discuss, there are various types of requirements. What are the various types of requirements that which we are going to discuss, right? So first one is of user requirements. What's the importance of user requirements? Based on the user requirements only, software system development will take place. So what are those various user requirements that we'll discuss? So what is the definition of user requirements? Statements in natural language plus diagram of the services the system provides and its operational constraints is called user requirements. So what's the importance of user requirements here? Statements in natural language plus diagram of the system services and its operational constraints is called user requirements. So what exactly the user is expecting the services, software services. So all those requirements that is given by the users, based on the user requirements, the development team going to develop a software system. That's the importance of user requirements. Next, we are going to discuss about system requirements. So what's the importance of system requirements? That we'll discuss, right? A structured document setting out detailed description of the system services written as a contract between client and the developer. So developers, they are going to develop a software system, whereas client expecting the services from the software system. All those contract between client and development team regarding development of software system, that is what the importance of system requirements. Next is of types of requirements. There are various types of requirements. The requirements are majorly classified here: functional requirements and non-functional requirements. So initially we are going to discuss about the requirements. So first one is software specification. హలో ఏమైంది వాయిస్ రాలేదా వాయిస్ బ్రేక్ అయిందా కంటిన్యూ అవుతుందా Sorry for the inconvenience due to technical issues, which was unable to audible to you. So I'm repeating the concepts. Let's discuss about types of requirements. What are the types of requirements that which we are going to discuss, right? User requirements. What's the importance of user requirements? That we'll discuss in detail. Statements in natural language plus diagram of the services the system should provide and its operational constraints called user requirements. So what is the importance of user requirements here? Statements in natural language plus diagram of the services the system should provide and its operational constraints is called user requirements. Let's see here. Here is the user and this is the software system, right? Software system. Here statements in natural language plus diagram of the services the system provides. Which system here? This is what software system, which was developed by the software developers. When user is sending a request, user request is processed by this developed software application and which is going to provide services back in the form of response to the user, right? So what is here user requirements here? Statements in natural language plus diagram of the services. What is the services this developed software application going to provide and how this developed software application going to be operatable by the users. When the users they are trying to access the developed software application services, is it how exactly they are going to operate it? That is what operational constraints. Constraints is nothing but what here? Condition, right? And all these are called as user requirements. So user requirements, what exactly user is expecting. The developed software application, what is the service going to be provided under certain conditions, right? All those defined in the form of user requirements. That is what the importance of user requirements, right? Coming to system requirements. So what's the importance of system requirements? That we'll discuss in detail here. A structured document setting out detailed description of the system services written as a contract between client and the developer. So what's the importance of system requirements here? So system requirements, a structured document. So what's the importance of document here? So we know about SRS document, software requirement specification document here. So contract between client and development team will take place. That SRS document which specifies in detail description about the client requirements or user requirements, right? Based on the user requirements only, the development team, they are going to develop a software system. So here system requirements which specifies what here is a structured document setting out detailed description of the system services written as a contract between client and the developer. Next, we are going to discuss about types of requirements. So what are the various types of requirements that we'll discuss? requirements for of here software specification, a detailed software description which can serve as a basis for design or implementation, right? There are various types of requirements. What are those is of functional requirements, non-functional requirements, and domain requirements. Requirements were classified into three categories. What are those is of functional requirements, non-functional requirements, and domain requirements. About functional requirements we will discuss. Statements of services the system should provide and how the system should react to particular input and how the system will behave to particular output. That is comes under functional requirements. What exactly functional requirements going to describe here is what are the functionalities where the developed software application going to provide to the client or user is called as functional requirements, mean functionality of a software system. That mean to say developed software application, what are the functionalities which is provided to the client or user that is represented in the form of functionality, functional requirements, right? So what is the importance of functional requirements? Describe functionality or system services. Just now we had discussed. So functional requirements, what it describes here, what are the services the developed software application going to provide to the user? That is what the functional requirements which describes, right? Next is of here, functional user requirements may be high-level statements of what the system should do. What exactly the system going to do? That means to say, developed software application, what exactly the services going to be provided and what exactly the client expecting, what type of services, all those will be described in the form of functional requirements. Next is, but functional system requirements should be described properly, right? Next we are going to discuss about non-functional requirements. What's the importance of these non-functional requirements? That which we are going to discuss. The importance of the non-functional requirements, once the software application was developed, delivered to the client, right, then the non-functional requirements will take place. Once the application was developed, then only non-functional requirements will take place here. So what are the non-functional requirements here? The developed application, what is the performance of the developed application? What is the reliability of the developed application? What is the security of the developed application? All these comes under non-functional requirements of a software system. What is the performance? Means that mean to say, what is the space complexity? What is the time complexity? All these comes under here non-functional requirements. So what are the various non-functional requirements? Non-functional requirements were classified into three major categories. What are those three major categories of non-functional requirements? That which we are going to describe with the help of diagrammatic representation, that we'll see. So just now we had discussed non-functional requirements, constraints on the services or functions offered by the system, such as timing constraints, constraints on the development process. All this comes under non-functional requirements. Let's discuss in detail about the non-functional requirements. Non-functional requirements were majorly classified into three categories. What are those here is product requirements. First one is of product requirements. Then what is second one here? Organizational requirements. What is third one? External requirements. So non-functional requirements were classified into three categories. What are those? Product requirements, organizational requirements, and external requirements. So initially we are going to discuss about product requirements. Again, product requirements were classified into again four types here. What are those here? Usability requirements. First one is of usability requirements. Second one is of efficiency requirements. Third one is of dependability requirements. Fourth one is of security requirements. So product requirements, first one is usability requirements. How efficiently the developed application going to be usable by the users, which comes under usability requirements. How easy the developed application which is going to be usable by the users, which comes under usability requirements. Coming to efficiency requirements. So efficiency. What is the efficiency of the developed application? That means to say, what is the performance of the developed application? Once the application was developed, delivered to the client, how fast the developed application going to execute, right? So which comes under performance requirements, right? Coming to space requirements, how much memory space can be occupied by the developed application, which comes under space requirements, right? So these are here product requirements, right? And coming to here, product requirements, dependability requirements. So is there any dependency among modules of developed application which comes under dependability requirements? Or is the developed application, is it depending while executing the developed application, is it depending on any other systems or not, which comes under dependability requirements, right? And coming to security requirements, what is the security level which was developed in the developed application? What's the security of the developed application, which comes under security requirements? So that is the first category of non-functional requirements. Coming to second category of non-functional requirements, that is organizational requirements. So what's the importance of organizational requirements? Organizational requirements were classified into three categories. First one is of environmental requirements. Second one is of operational requirements. Third one is of development requirements. So organizational requirements were classified into three categories. What are those? Is environmental requirements, operational requirements, development requirements. Environmental requirements. What is the environment required for development of software system? In which environment the developed application going to work? All these defined under this environmental requirements. Coming to operational requirements, once the application was developed, under what constraints the application which is going to be operatable by the users, which is called as operational requirements. Then what is development requirements? Development requirements, which represents what is the implementation language which was used by the developers, which comes under development requirements. So this is what the second category of non-functional requirements. Coming to third one, external requirements. So what's the importance of these external requirements? External requirements were classified into three categories: regulatory requirements, ethical requirements, legislative requirements. So why the name given external requirements? These requirements were external to the developed software application. So external requirements were not internal part of the developed application, which were external to the developed application. That's why the name given external requirements. Why the name given external requirements here? The requirements which were external to the external behavior of the developed application, right? That's why the name given external requirements. First one is of regulatory requirements. What is the importance of this regulatory requirements? So in regulatory requirements, what are the regulations which is going to approach the developed application, which comes under regulatory requirements? Coming to ethical requirements. So the developed application set, which is supposed to be accessible by with the ethical values, which is supposed to be accessible by general public and based on the ethical values of the users. So that is comes under ethical requirements. Coming to legislative requirements. So the developed application supposed to be developed based on the given law, within the law. That is what legislative requirements. Again, which is classified into accounting requirements as well as safety or security requirements. So this is about non-functional requirements of a software system. Non-functional requirements of a software system, right? Coming to next one is, which we are going to discuss, is of domain requirements. What's the importance of domain requirements? That we'll discuss in detail, right? Requirements that come from the application domain and that reflect characteristics of that domain. So which comes under domain requirements. Under which domain? The software application going to be developed, right? So based on the domain requirements can be derived from the application domain, the software application or the software project which is going to be developed based on which domain, right? So the application which belongs to the application which is going to be developed based on which domain, based on that domain requirements can be derived. Requirements that come from the application domain and that reflect the characteristics of that domain, right? And domain requirements are derived from the application domain and described by system characteristics and features that reflect. right? So domain requirement problems. So this domain requirement also having some problems. What are those various problems that we'll discuss in detail, right? So understandability is one of the problem. So it's unable to understand what exactly the application which is going to be developed in so and so domain is it, but here the development team, they are unable to understand. That is the problem with domain requirements, right? Implicitness. So implicitness also one of the problem, domain requirement problem, right? Next we are going to discuss user requirements. What's the importance of user requirements? That we'll discuss. Should describe functional and non-functional requirements. Should describe functional and non-functional requirements. So user requirements is a combination of functional and non-functional requirements. So we had discussed what is functional requirements and what is non-functional requirements. So functional requirements which represents software system services. What exactly the client is expecting from the, what services the client is expecting from the developed application, which comes under functional requirements of a software system. Then coming to non-functional requirements of a software system, what is the performance of the developed application, what is the reliability of the developed application, what is the usability of the developed application, what is the security of the developed application, what is the throughput of the developed application. All these comes under non-functional requirements of a software system, right? So that is what user requirements, which describes functional requirements as well as non-functional requirements. Why user supposed to give proper requirements, then only the development team, they can develop a software system based on the user requirements. So user requirement consists of functional requirements as well as non-functional requirements, right? So that they are understandable by system users, so that who do not have detailed technical knowledge. So user requirements are defined using natural language, tables and diagrams. So how the user requirements can be represented? User requirements can be represented, that is in the form of natural language, that is in the form of table, and that is in the form of diagrams also. Why diagrammatic representation required here? So the people who don't have technical knowledge, even they also should understand the requirements properly. Even development team should understand the user requirements properly. That's why user requirements should be defined, that is in the form of natural language, or else that is in the form of tables, or else that is in the form of diagrammatic representation, so that development team, they can better understand the user requirements, so that they can develop a quality software project and which can satisfy the client expectations, client needs. That is what the importance of user requirements, right? And what are the problems with natural language? There are various problems with natural language. What are those problems that we'll discuss, right? The problems here is lack of clarity. So there is no proper clarity with natural language. Once the requirements were, user requirements were defined by using natural language, once the requirements were defined by using natural language, there is a lack of clarity. That means to say development team might not understand properly. So why lack of clarity? So the requirements were not properly defined in natural language, so lack of clarity. And what is one more problem here? Requirements confusion. That is also one of the problem with natural language. Requirements amalgamation. So that is also problem with natural language, right? What are the guidelines for writing requirements? The user requirements supposed to be written in the form of document, is it? So while writing user requirements, some guidelines supposed to be followed, so that all the stakeholders, they can better understand the user requirements, so that they can develop, the development team, they can develop a proper software application, right? So to write the requirements, some guidelines supposed to be followed. So what is that here is, invent a standard format and use it for all requirements. Invent a standard format and use it for all requirements. Next is, use language in a consistent way. Use the language in a consistent way. Next is of use text highlighting to identify key points of the requirements, right? Use text highlighting, right, to identify key points of the requirements, right? Avoid the use of computer jargon, that means to say too much technical knowledge. So why, what is the problem with too much technical knowledge? If the user requirements were written is it, with too much technical knowledge. The client who don't have that much of technical knowledge, right, they cannot understand, even other stakeholders, even other developers also. That's why the requirements, while writing requirements, they should not use too much technical knowledge, because other stakeholders might not understand. Who don't have that much of technical knowledge, they cannot understand the requirements. That is what some of the guidelines while writing software requirements, right? Next, we are going to discuss about system requirements. So, what is the importance of system requirements? More detailed specification of user requirements. So, user has given the user requirements. Those user requirements supposed to be described in more detailed way, which we call it as system requirements, right? Next is of serve as a basis for designing the system. Serve as a basis for designing the system. So, system requirements. So, we already know SDLC phases, is it? SDLC phases, software development lifecycle phases. So, what is the base to design a software system, right? So, we already know SDLC phases, planning and risk. Second one is of requirements and analysis, design, implementation, testing, deployment, maintenance, right? Now, observe here carefully. So, what is the base for design? This is what the design phase. The base for design here is requirements gathering. After gathering requirements, those requirements supposed to be analyzed, discarding of contradictory requirements, ambiguous requirements, incomplete requirements. After that, after analysis, one document will be prepared, SRS, Software Requirement Specification Document, based on this design of a software system. That means to say preparing blueprint for the software system. So, that is what solution can be given. So, what is the base here? Requirements, right? More detailed specification of user requirements serve as a basis for design. This SRS document which consists of user requirements. So, what is the base for this design here? This user requirements, that's what the point here. Next, maybe used as part of the system contract, right? And what are the standard formats? Standard format had 6 system requirements. What are those here is form-based node specification, function, right? Description. So, these are some standard formats for system requirements. So, what are the inputs the system going to take, and what is the source for the system, and what is the output which is going to be produced by the software system, and what is the destination. So, these are all the standard formats, and requires preconditions, post conditions, right, side effects, right. So, PDL based specification means here requirements that is represented by using one of the language, that is program definition language, PDL. So, software requirements were specified by using one of the language, that is PDL, program definition language, right. So, we are taking one example, class ATM. So, the development team, they are going to develop the ATM application. So, how to represent the requirements, system requirements, that is in the form of by using this program definition language, class ATM, public static void main string arguments, right. And what we are trying here, whether the given ATM card is it valid or invalid, while card is card validation, right. So, that is what brief about how to represent the system requirements by using program definition language. So, this language also having some drawback, disadvantages. So, what are the disadvantages of program definition language, PDL? What are the drawbacks of this program definition language? That we will discuss briefly. Program definition language may not be sufficiently expressive to express the system functionality. So that is one of the disadvantage of program definition language, right? So program definition language may not be sufficiently express you to express the system functionality. So the developed software system, what are the functionality going to provide to the users, that might not be expressed properly by using this program definition language. That is one of the drawback. What is the next drawback here? Notations which were used by this program definition language, notation only understandable with people having programming language. The people who don't have programming language, they cannot understand the notations which were used in this program definition language. That is one more drawback, right? Similar way, the requirements may be taken as design specification. The requirements may be taken as design specification rather than model to help understand the system. So that is also missing here. That's it. So these are the drawbacks of program definition language. Next, we are going to discuss briefly about interface specification. So what is the importance of interface? So what is the need of interfaces? Let's take any software application or any software system gets divided into modules. Again, any module gets divided into components. Those components are supposed to communicate. One component wants to send a message to another component, or one component wants to communicate with another component. So what is required here? Interfaces. So communication among components can be established by using interfaces. Even communication among modules also can be achieved by using interfaces. So that is what the importance of interface. What exactly this interface defines here? Set of operations which is specified by a system. So set interface represents for here set of operations which is specified by a component. That is what we call it as interface here. Most systems must operate with other systems. So there is software system 1 wants to communicate with another software system, or a component 1 wants to communicate with another component. Then exactly we need here interfaces. So most systems must operate with other systems, and the operating interfaces must be specified as part of the requirements, right? Types of interfaces. There are various types of interfaces. What are those various types of interfaces here? Procedural interface, data structures interface, and data representation interfaces. So we'll take simple example here, right? So here, open the door, one of the example, right? So what is your procedural interface here? So we have to follow some procedure to open a door. So here open, to open a door we have to follow some procedure. So open, which comes under procedural interface, how to open a door. So moving near to the door and grab the knob and opening the door. So what is the procedure to open a door, which comes under procedural interface? That is what the importance of procedural interface. And data structures. So some data structures supposed to be used, is it? So data. So what exactly here? Door is the data representation and data structure. So data specification related, data structures and data representation. So which comes under here, example for data related interface here is what here? Door. We will take simple example for interface, interface X. Interface X, right, has defined an abstract, right? So here abstract methods, wide Y, right, wide Z, right? That means to say here implementation of these methods were not just abstract, only method name, that's it. No implementation details specified here. So which comes under here? Interface. Requirements document structure. So we already aware that SRS document. What is the importance of this SRS document? Software requirement specification document, which consists of all client requirements and project development strategies will be specified in this SRS document, right? So based on this SRS document only, the designers, they are going to design a software system. Based on the design model only, the programmers, they can generate source code, right? Based on the program model only, testers, they can perform testing process. That means to say, what is the source for development of any software system? That means to say, this SRS document. Is it? So what are the requirements which is given by the client, which will be specified in the form of SRS document? So what is the structure of that SRS document, that which we are going to discuss? So that is requirements document structure. We call it as requirements document structure. So what exactly this SRS document structure consists of? What exactly which consists of? Introduction about that particular software application or software project, glossary, right? User requirements definition. We had discussed about user requirements, right? And system architecture. So what is the architecture of the software system? SRS, just now we had discussed, software requirement specification document. right? System models. So the purpose of system model is better understandability of that particular software system can be achieved by representing the system model. So system models makes to better understand the software system. So there are various types of system models, right? System evaluation. So what are the changes while developing a software system? Some changes will take place. System evaluation, improvement of the system. Next, appendices, index, right? Requirements document, requirements. So it should be how the requirements SRS document should be. It should be easy to change. Why the SRS document, software requirement specification document, should be easy to change? That's a question here. It should be easy to change. Why it's easy to change? The point here is the client, initially they given some requirements. Based on their requirements, the development team, they had started the development of software system. After some time period, might be after 2 months or after 3 months or after 6 months, the client, they given some additional requirements. That's it. So those requirements supposed to be adaptable. That's why this SRS document supposed to allow to what are the changes later which is given by the client supposed to be what here adaptable in this document. That is what it should be easy to change. The developed SRS document supposed to be changeable, right? Whatever frequent changes which is given by the client, that's supposed to be the SRS document supposed to allow to changes. That is what it should be easy to change. It is so vast reference tool for maintenance, right? It should be able to predict changes. So what are the changes the client going to give in future that's supposed to be predicted, right? It should specify external system behavior. So when some input is given, how the system behavior is changing, right? And how it is processing the given input, how it is going to produce some output, all those supposed to be specified. Next, we are going to discuss about software requirements specification, SRS document, right? So who are the stakeholders here? System customers. So what is the importance of the system customers? That which we are going to discuss. The importance of system customers here is what exactly they'll specify here? Specify the requirements and read them to check that they meet their needs. Customers specify changes to the requirements. System customers role here is what are the changes which is given by the client or customers. Those supposed to be specified properly, right? Then what is the role of managers? What they will do here? Use the requirements document. Requirements document is nothing but which document here? SRS document, software requirement specification document. Use the requirements document to plan a bid for the system and to plan system development process. Next, system engineers. What is the role here? Use the requirements to understand what system is to be developed. So system engineers, they are supposed to understand, use the requirements to understand what system is to be developed, what type of system is supposed to be developed, right? The next is system engineers use the requirements to develop validation tests for the system. So what is the importance of this validation testing? What is the importance of validation testing? So whether the software system which is going to be developed, is it based on the client expectations or not, that will be validated. That process we call it as validation testing, right? Next is of system maintenance engineers. Use the requirements to understand the system and the relationship between its parts. Maintenance is nothing but the software system was developed, delivered to the client. Is it while evaluating the client, they identified minor changes. Those minor changes supposed to be repeated to whom here? Maintenance team. Those minor changes, the maintenance team going to resolve. That is what the importance of system maintenance, right? Next, the IEEE standard. So SRS document supposed to be prepared by using some standards, right? IEEE. So you know what is IEEE here? Institute for Electrical and Electronic Engineers, some standards body, some experts team. They had prepared some standard format, right? So if any software engineering team, if they want to develop SRS document, means user requirements that is in the form of SRS document, if they follow this IEEE standard, their project, they can develop the quality project so that which can satisfy by the client. That's why most of the software industries, is it, software engineers, is it, they'll follow IEEE standard for preparing of their SRS document for their projects. So that's why the IEEE standard suggests the following structure for requirements document. So what are those exactly? We'll see here. The IEEE standard SRS document, which consists of introduction about that particular problem, introduction about that particular software application. Next is of purpose of the requirements document. What is the purpose? Requirements document which specifies a user requirements, system requirements, domain requirements, functional requirements, non-functional requirements, project plan means project strategies, how to develop a software system, right? And scope of the project. If we develop this product, what is the scope, right? And which consists of definitions, acronyms and abbreviations. References. So while developing software requirement specification document, is it the software engineering team, they'll refer. So what are the references they had used that's supposed to be specified in that SRS document, right? And overview of the remainder of the document. So overview about the document, SRS document, product perspective, right? Product perspective. Next here is product functions. So the developed product going to provide what are the functions to the users that will be specified. Next is of user characteristics. User means whom here? Clients, right? So what are the characteristics of users? What type of services the users they are expecting? That is in the form of what here? User characteristics. User characteristics defines here what exactly the user is expecting, what type of service from the developed application, right? Next, general constraints. We know what is meant by constraints, conditions, under which conditions the developed software system is supposed to be developed. So what is the budget? Within this given budget, with the given team, is it? So with the given schedule, that is all this comes under constraints, that mean to say conditions, right? And assumptions and dependencies. So some assumptions, some dependencies. The developed application, is it while executing, while performing some operations, is it depending with other systems or not? All those supposed to be identified, right? And specific requirements covers functional, non-functional and interface requirements. So we had discussed about what is functional requirements, what is non-functional requirements, right? What is interface and all we had discussed, right? And next is appendices, index. The structure of a requirements document, what is the structure here? Preface, right? So this should define the expected readership of the document and describes its version. So what is the version of that particular document and all, including the rationale for the creation of new version and a summary of the changes made in each version. So we already know what is the need of releasing new versions. So already one version will be there. Is it that version supposed to be improved, modified, and releasing new version. Again, that will be evaluated. Some changes will be given by the client based on the client changes. Is it the version supposed to be what remodified? Again, improved version will be released. Version 1, 2, 3, 4. So about the product version supposed to be specified. That is what we call it as preface, right? Next is introduction. This should describe the need for the system. So introduction means what is the need for the system, the software application which was developed by the developers and that is delivered to the client. The need of that particular product or software application or project here is what type of service the user expecting from that system. So those system services supposed to be described. That is what this should introduction part. This should describe the need for the system. You should briefly describe the functions. Explain how it will work with other systems. So once the introduction part, what it describes here, the developed software system, what are the functionalities which is going to provide to the users, that will be described in this introduction part. It should describe how the system fits into the overall business or strategic objectives of the organization commissioning the software, right? Next is glossary. What's the importance of this glossary? This should define the technical terms used in the document. This should define the technical terms used in the document, right? You should not make assumptions about the experience or expertise of the reader, right? User requirements definition. The service provided for the user and the non-functional system requirements should be described in this section, right? Product and process standards which must be followed should be specified. Next, we are discussing here system architecture. So what is the importance of system architecture? It presents a high-level overview of the anticipated system architecture, showing the distribution of functions across the system modules. So any software system, let's take, this is what the software complex, large complex software application. Large complex software application. Software application. Software application gets divided into modules. Module 1, module 2, right? Module 3, right? So large complex software application what gets divided into modules. Again, modules what gets divided into components. Component 1, right? Component 2, component 3. Module 2 also gets divided into what here? Component 4, component 5, component 6 gets divided into component 7, component 8. The size of the component is small so that the designers and developers, they can easily design, they can easily develop. That's it. So that is what the purpose of here, dividing the large complex application into small modules. Again, small modules are gets divided into small components so that they can be easily designed, developed, testable, reusable, replaceable. These are all the advantages of with small components, right? So what exactly here? System architecture, it presents a high-level overview of the anticipated system architecture, showing what here? Distribution of functions across the system modules. These are all the modules, right? Architectural components, these are all the components that are used should be highlighted. What are the components? Each and every module consists of what are the components? Here is 3 components, here is 2 components, right? That is what the architecture. System requirement specification, right? This should describe the functional and non-functional requirements in more detail, right? If necessary, further detail also added to the non-functional requirements, interfaces to other systems may be defined here. System models. So what's the importance of system models? This should set out one or more system models showing the relationship between system components and the system and its environment. This might be object models, data flow models, and semantic data models. The purpose of all these models here is to better understand the views of the software system. Through the models, the software system can be better understandable by various stakeholders. That is what the importance of modeling various system models. Was it? Data flow models, DFDs, data flow diagrams. So designing a software system by using DFDs, data flow diagrams. So what is data flow diagram? So flow of data within this, processing the data within the software system, DFDs. System evaluation, what are the changes, right? This should describe the fundamental assumptions on which the system is based and anticipated changes due to hardware evaluation, changing user needs. So what are the frequent changes which is given by the client, those supposed to be adopted in the developed software system. So based on that, new versions will be released, right? Appendices. This should provide detailed specific information which is related to the application. Next is of examples of appendices that may be included are hardware and database descriptions. Next, index. Several indexes to the document may be included, as well as a normal alphabetic index, right? And there may be an index of diagrams, an index of functions, etc. Right? Next, we are going to discuss about verification and validation. What is the importance of verification? What is the importance of validation? That we'll discuss. Verification, validation. The software system which is going to be developed, is it based on the client requirements or not? This process we call it as verification. The software system which is going to be developed, is it the software system which is developing by the developers, is it based on the client requirements or not? Is it this process of verification we call it as verification. This process of cross-checking is called as verification. The developed software system, is it developing based on the client requirements or not? This process we call it as verification. Then coming to validation. What is the importance of validation? The developed software system, which was developed with the developers, is it based on the client expectations or not? Based on the client expectations or not? This process we call it as validation. If it is the developed application which was developed based on the client expectations, then validation process is successful. If not, validation process identified, what are the changes supposed to be done? So validation process which validate the developed application, is it based on the client expectations or not? That particular validation will take place. That is what the importance of validation. So verification means here base is the application, software application which is going to be developed, is it based on the client requirements or not? Validation process which validate here is the developed application, is it based on the client expectation or not? So these two we call it as verification and validation. Verification, are we building the product right? Means is it based on the client requirements? Validation, are we building the right product? The product which was developed, is it based on the client expectation or not? Is it reached the client expectations or not? That is what validation, right? The role of verification that involves checking that the software conforms to its specification. You should check that it meets its specific functional and non-functional requirements. We had discussed what is functional requirements, what is non-functional requirements. Functional requirements which specifies the developed application, is it what is the functionality going to be provided to the users. Non-functional means what is the performance of the developed application, reliability, and throughput, all this comes under non-functional requirements, right? The aim of validation is to ensure that the software system meets the customer expectations. Just now we had discussed validation process, right? Is the developed application, is it based on the client expectations or not, right? It goes beyond checking that the system conforms to its specification to showing that the software does what the customer expects it to do so. The ultimate goal of the verification and validation process is to establish confidence that the software system is fit for purpose. Right? This means that the system must be good enough for its intended use. The level of required confidence depends on the system's purpose, the expectations of the system users, and the current marketing environment for the system. Right? Software functions. What is the functionality of the developed software application? Right? User expectations, user is expecting. So what exactly the developed application is supposed to provide? These are the services that we call it as user expectation. User is expecting some services from the developed application, right? Next is marketing environment. Once the application was developed and delivered to the client, what is the market environment? Within the verification and validation process, there are two complementary approaches to system checking and analysis. What are those here is software inspections or peer reviews. What is the purpose of conducting software inspections or reviews process here? So potential errors will be identified at early stages so that development cost will be reduced. That is what the purpose of conducting inspections, software inspections on various phases of SDLC, software development lifecycle phases, right? So on design inspection, on design phase inspection will take place, or reviews will take place on implementation phase also, so that the potential errors will be identified at early stages. That is what the purpose of conducting what here? Software inspections or peer reviews. So review team, review members, software engineers, with the help of software engineers, group of software engineers, they will perform a review on the design or development of the software system. They'll identify errors that is given to the designers and developers. They'll correct those errors and so that the development cost will be reduced, right? Next is of software testing. So you know what is the importance of software testing. In SDLC, there are various phases. After implementation, after source code generation by the programmers, that generated source code might have syntax errors, semantic errors, processing errors, logical errors. Those errors are supposed to be identified by applying software testing. So what is software testing? Testing is the process of executing a program or application with the intent of finding errors. And once the software testers, they identify errors, they will prepare error report that is given to the developers. They will perform debugging process. They will correct those errors so that the application is error free. That is what the purpose of software testing, right? Next, static and dynamic verification and validation. Static and dynamic verification and validation, right? Let's see here software inspections. So here is requirement specification. So SRS document simply we call it as, right? And the requirements document. So here prototype is nothing but what here? Sample model, initial version of a software system can be built and that will be evaluated. If any changes required, those prototypes supposed to be improved, right? Software inspections. So high level design. So on high level design, inspections will be conducted, errors will be identified. Formal specifications was it? And detailed design, right? So, and here program means application. Was it program testing? Through testing process, program will be tested, right? Next, we are going to discuss about requirements engineering process. What's the importance of this requirements engineering process? Requirements engineering process varies widely depending upon the application domain, the people involved and the organization developing the requirements, right? So let's see here the requirements engineering process. What is the importance of requirements engineering process? That we'll discuss in detail. Feasibility study. Requirements engineering process consists of various phases. Feasibility study, requirements elicitation and analysis, requirements specification. So what is feasibility study? So feasibility study, before going to develop a software system, feasibility study can be conducted. In this feasibility study, the software system which is going to be developed, is it worthwhile or not? The software system which was proposed to develop, can we implement it or not? Is it implementable or not? If we develop a software system, is it develop and if we deliver to the client, can that developed application, can it run in benefit or not? All those things will be determined under this feasibility study. So the software system which is going to be developed, is it worthwhile or not? Can we implement the software system or not? Can we run in benefit? Once we develop it, can it run in benefit or not? All those things will be determined under this feasibility study. So before going to develop a software system, feasibility study is supposed to be conducted so that all these things will be determined so that the software project can be developed with quality, right? So based on conducting the feasibility study, feasibility report will be prepared. What this feasibility report consists of? So feasibility report consists of the project which is going to be developed, is it worthwhile or not? Is it implementable or not? If we develop it, can it the developed application, can it run in benefit or not? All those details will be included in this feasibility report. That is what the importance of feasibility report, right? Coming to requirements elicitation and analysis. So what is requirements elicitation? Requirements elicitation represents what here? Discovering of requirements, discovering the requirements from various sources, from clients, from from users and from other stakeholders. Gathering the requirements, discovering of requirements. The discovered requirements might have contradiction in it, ambiguity in it, incompleteness in it. That's why the discovered requirements supposed to be analyzed. Analysis process supposed to be performed on it. So what is the need or purpose of conducting analysis here? So discarding contradictory requirements, discarding incomplete requirements, discarding ambiguous requirements, and only the requirements which were useful for development of software system. With that, one document will be prepared. Name of the document is SRS document, Software Requirements Specification Document. Software Requirements Specification Document. Right? So that is what the requirements elicitation analysis, and from this system models can be built to better understand the software system. To improve the purpose of system models here is how to improve the existing system, right? How to propose the new system, right? And how to better understand the software system. So by building various models, the software system which is going to develop can be viewed with different perspectives. That's it. So system models helps to improve the software system, right? Coming to requirement specification, that is what here SRS document, software requirement specification document. So what exactly this SRS document consists of? So which consists of here client requirements, which consists of client requirements, project strategies, which consists of project strategies, right? So requirement specification, here requirements validation. Are the requirements which were specified in this SRS document, are those based on the client expectations or not, client needs or not? Those should be validated. That is what we call it as requirements validation. So once the requirements were validated, valid requirements supposed to be specified in the document. That the document we call it as requirements document, right? So from requirement specification, user and system requirements supposed to be specified here, right? This is about requirements engineering process. We have discussed what is feasibility study, what it determines here. Feasibility study decides whether or not the proposed system is worthwhile. The system which is going to be developed, is it worthwhile or not? If the system which is going to be developed, if it is not worthwhile, there is no purpose. That's why feasibility study is supposed to be conducted before going to develop a software system. That is what the purpose, right? And is the system contributes to organizational objectives? If we develop a software system, will it achieve the objective of the organization, software industry or not? That also will be determined under this feasibility study, right? Next is the system can be integrated with other systems or not? If we develop the system, is it possible to integrate with other systems or not? And that is also will be determined under this feasibility study, right? Is the system can be engineered using current technology and within budget or not? So the software system which is proposed, which is going to be developed, can be developed within the given budget or not, with the given current technology or not. So that also will be determined under this feasibility study. So feasibility study helps to the project managers. It helps to the project managers to develop a better quality software project, right? Questions that might be asked in the feasibility study process. What are the questions might be asked in this feasibility study process that we will see here. So what if the system was not implemented? So if the system was unable to implement it, then what is the solution for that? Right? What will be the integration problem if we are trying for integrating our system with another system? If any integrated related issues will come, what is the solution for that? So all these questions will be asked in this feasibility study process, right? And is new technology needed? Is it required new technology to implement our new proposed system? That also will be determined under this feasibility study. What facilities must be supported by the proposed system? What are the facilities required? Next. Next we are going to discuss requirements elicitation and analysis. So we have discussed what is requirements elicitation, discovering requirements from various sources. That means to say gathering requirements from various stakeholders. Requirements elicitation. Once the requirements were discovered, the discovered requirements might have contradiction in it, ambiguity in it, incomplete requirements might be there. All those supposed to be thoroughly analyzed. Through analysis process, contradictory, ambiguous, incomplete requirements will be discarded, and the requirements which were useful for development of software system, those will be specified. That specification of requirements we call it as in the form of document, that is SRS, software requirement specification document. So this is based on this SRS document only, the designers, they are going to design a software system. Based on the design only, the programmers, they will generate source code. So what is the source for development of any software system is SRS document is the source for development of any software system, right? Problems in requirements analysis. What are the problems here? Stakeholders don't know what they want. Means if sometimes when the clients, they are giving requirements for the development of their project, if they are unaware that what exactly they are expecting from the software system, then that is a problem. That is a problem, right? And stakeholders express requirements in their own terms. Means the client, they don't have that much of technical knowledge. Whatever knowledge they have, with their little knowledge, they are trying for giving requirements that might not be properly understandable by the development team. If the development team cannot understand the client requirements properly, they cannot develop a quality product, they cannot develop the software system based on the client expectations. These are all the problems, right, which might occur in requirements analysis process. Stakeholders may have conflicting requirements. That means to say, client initially given some requirements, later given some more requirements, both were conflicting. Contradiction will take place. So that is also a problem with analysis. Organizational and political factors may influence the system requirements. Organizational as well as political factors, right? And the requirements may change during process. About this requirements analysis process, that which we are going to discuss with the help of diagrammatic representation, right? Now observe here. Domain understanding. Domain understanding. So what's the importance of domain understanding? Once the domain was understood, right, the requirements validation will take place here, validating the client requirements, right? And based on that, SRS document will be prepared. SRS stands for Software Requirement Specification Document. Software Requirements Specification. Software Requirements Specification Document. Software Requirements Specification Document. SRS document, right? And based on this here, prioritization will take place. Priority of requirements. So which requirements should be given high priority, which requirements should be given low priority. Prioritization of requirements. And conflict resolution. Is there any conflict, contradiction, ambiguities in that? Incompleteness, those supposed to be resolved. And here classification of requirements will take place. And here is domain requirements. From this requirements collection will take place. Classification of requirements and conflict resolution and priority of the requirements, right? And based on this, SRS document will be prepared, right? And requirements will be validated, and based on that, finally SRS document will be prepared. Requirements discovery, gathering the requirements from various sources. That is what the importance of requirements discovery, right? This is the process of interacting with stakeholders in the system to collect their requirements domain requirements from stakeholders and documentation are also discovered during this activity, right? So requirements classification and organization. This activity takes unstructured collection of requirements, groups and related requirements. So classifying the requirements, that's what here. Requirements prioritization, giving priority to the requirements, which requirements were having high priority, which requirements were having low priority. Requirements documentation, SRS document supposed to be prepared, right? Requirements discovery is the process of gathering the information about the proposed and existing systems and distilling the user and system requirements from this information, right? So sources of information during the requirements, right? You interact with the stakeholders through the interviews. So here requirements can be gathered by conducting interviews, and through observation process also requirements can be gathered, and scenarios also, is it? And by building prototypes also. Prototypes also helps to gather more and more requirements from the clients. Viewpoint oriented elicitation, that means to say through viewpoint orientation also the requirements can be gathered from the clients, right? So stakeholders represent different ways of looking up a problem, is called here problem viewpoint. So stakeholders represent different ways of looking up a problem, that is called problem viewpoint. So method based analysis here. So widely used approach to requirements analysis depends on the application of structured method to understand the system. Viewpoints can be used as a way of classifying stakeholders and other sources of requirements. There are three generic types of viewpoints. What are those here? We'll see here. Interactor viewpoints represents the people or other systems that interact directly with the system. So how the people they are directly interacting with the system. In the bank ATM system, right, examples of interactive viewpoints are the bank's customers, and the bank's account database. So the user, the ATM user, they are directly interacting with the ATM application. So that type of interaction we call it as interactor viewpoints. Through interacting the software application, the users, the ATM user, they can better understand that particular developed application. That's it. Indirect viewpoints represent stakeholders who do not use directly the system, developed software system, but they influence the requirements in some way. In the bank ATM system, examples of indirect viewpoints are the management of the bank and the bank security staff. They are not directly interacting with the ATM application, ATM mission, but they are influencing the requirements of the software system. That we call it as indirect viewpoints. Then what is here? Domain viewpoints represent domains, characteristics and constraints that influence the system requirements. In the bank ATM system, an example of a domain viewpoint would be standards that have been developed for the interbank communication. Some standards, while developing ATM applications, some standards supposed to be followed, which comes under domain viewpoints, right, which determines. So viewpoint oriented requirements discovery, viewpoint identification, viewpoint structuring, viewpoint documentation, viewpoint system mapping. So what's the importance of this viewpoint identification that we'll see here? Discover viewpoints which receive system services and identify the service provided to each viewpoint. So discover here, viewpoint identification is nothing but identifying various views. Discover viewpoints which receive system services and identify the service provided to each viewpoint. Next is viewpoint structuring. So creating hierarchy here, group related viewpoints into a hierarchy. That's it. So creating hierarchy of views, right? Viewpoint documentation, preparing documentation, right? So refine the description of the identified viewpoints and preparing in the form of document, right? Next is viewpoint system mapping. So transform the analysis to an object-oriented design. So we had discussed SDLC phases, is it? So that is planning and risk, right? Requirements and analysis design. Here is implementation. Now observe, transform the analysis to an design. So here is analysis. Through analysis process, what will be prepared here? SRS document. Based on the SRS document, design will be placed. So viewpoint system mapping means here mapping the SRS document. Analysis, after analysis, SRS document will be prepared. Based on the SRS document, design will take place. That is what mapping viewpoint system mapping we call it as, right? So here viewpoint template, reference, attributes, events, service, sub viewpoints, all these security validation, security or validation, right? All viewpoints, customer, banks tab, right? So account holder will be there, means client, customer, foreign customers will be there, two types of customers here, and bank staff, managers, engineers, right? Technical engineers. So this is what all viewpoints. So a customer will view the ATM application with different view, account holder as well as bank staff, managers, as it engineers. So all stakeholders, they can view the ATM application in their view, different views. They have their own views, right? So scenario. So what is the importance of scenario? Or descriptions of how a system is used in practice. The developed ATM application, how it can be used in practice by various ATM users. So that can be represented in the form of scenarios. So through this scenario process also, requirements can be discovered. That is what the purpose of. So scenario also one of the method to discover requirements from various stakeholders, right? So they are help when requirements elicitation, as people can relate to this more readily than abstract statements of what they require from a system, right? Scenario description, right? System state at beginning of scenario, right? Normal flow in a scenario, right? So what can go wrong and how it is handled, right? Other concurrent activities, system state on completion of scenario. Next, use cases. We know what is meant by use case. Graphical representation of use case. Ellipse. This is what graphical representation of use case. What is use case represents here? Set of sequences of operations which are performed by a software system. We call it as use case here. Let's take, this is what the ATM application. ATM application. ATM application. This ATM application is a collection of use cases. What are those here? Withdraw, one use case. Deposit, one use case. Check balance, there were many. Check balance, this is also one use case. Who will going to interact here? ATM user. ATM user, is it? So this is what use case. Through this use case also, is it, requirements can be discovered from the client, more detailed requirements can be discovered. So use cases, scenarios are the different methods to discover requirements from the client, more detailed requirements from the client. That is what the purpose of use cases, right? Use cases are scenario based technique in UML. UML stands for Unified Modeling Language. UML stands for what here? Unified Modeling Language. Modeling language. UML stands for Unified Modeling Language. What is the purpose of this UML? If you want to model a software system using UML, as its software designers, they can design a software system. UML is one of the object-oriented modeling language, having many advantages. That's why UML became popular, right? So use cases are scenario-based techniques in UML, which identify the actors. This is what here actors, ATM user, an interaction, and which describes the interaction itself. So how the actor, user, ATM user is interacting with the software system. So this entire thing, we call it as use case diagram, right? So use case diagram purpose is to represent the functional requirements of a software system. So what are the functionality, that's it, which the software system going to provide to the users. That is what the importance of what here, use cases. Next, ethnography. So what is the importance of this ethnography that we'll discuss, the importance of ethnography. So the science of studying and analyzing how people actually work on a software product is called ethnography. So the science of studying and analyzing how people actually work on a software product is called ethnography. So torchlight, underground, normal, 100 feet height, right? So this ethnography also one of the method of discovering requirements, right? So here through this ethnography process, ethnography and prototyping for requirements analysis, discovering requirements through by using one of the method, that is ethnography. Is it gathering more detailed requirements by using ethnography process, right? So ethnography analysis, debriefing meeting, right? Focused ethnography, right? And here generic system development, system prototyping, prototype evaluation. We know what is meant by prototype. Prototype is nothing but building a sample system. Prototype is nothing but building an initial version of a software system. Initially, with few requirements, the software system was developed, sample model, initial model was developed, and which is evaluated by the client, prototype evaluation. If they identified any changes, those changes are supposed to be given to development team. With the client changes, they'll develop the second prototype, improved version of the prototype. Again, that will be evaluated. And again, if the client, if they identified some more changes, some more additional feature functionality they are expecting from the prototype 2, as yet those changes again given to development team. With those changes, they would build improved version of the prototype 3. So till the client has to satisfy that, was it? For example, prototype 4 was satisfied by the client. That meant to say prototype 4 is considered by the development team that is a final version of a software system. That way, this ethnographic process, which helps to the software engineering team to gather more and more requirements. Is it? That means to say with few requirements, initial version of a software system model can be built. If it is evaluated by the client, means that means to say when they are evaluating, they are giving some more requirements. Is it? With those requirements, they'll build improved version of the prototype 2. Again, that is evaluated by the client. So client again, after evaluating, they are giving some more requirements. That means to say ethnography process, which is going to gather and are going to discover more detailed requirements for development of a software system. That is what the purpose of ethnography. That is the purpose of ethnography, right? Ethnography is particularly effective for discovering two types of requirements. What are those two types of requirements that you will see here? Requirements that are derived from the way in which people actually work rather than the way in which the process definitions say they ought to work. So requirements that are derived from the way in which people work. So actually in underground, how the people they are working. So that entire scenario can be captured through ethnographic process. Right? For example, air traffic controllers may switch off a conflict alert system that detects aircraft with intersecting flight paths even through normal control procedures specify that it should be used. So that way, this ethnographic process helps to gather more and more requirements for development of software system. They deliberately put the aircraft on conflicting paths for a short time to help manage the airspace to resolve the problem. Right? Their control strategy is designed to ensure that these aircrafts are moved apart before problems occur and find the conflict alert alarm distracts them from their work. Next ethnographic method is requirements that are derived from cooperation and awareness of other people's activities. Right? For example, air traffic controllers may use an awareness of other controllers' work to predict the number of aircrafts that will be entering their control sector. So they then modify their control strategies depending on that predicted workload. Right? Therefore, an automated ATC, air traffic control system, should allow controllers in a sector to have some visibility of the work in adjacent sectors. Next, we are going to discuss about requirements validation. So what is the importance of requirements validation? That we will discuss, requirements validation. So requirements validation is the process of checking that requirements actually define the system that the customer really wants. Is it? So are the requirements which were defined based on the client expectations, client needs or not, all those will be taken place under this requirements validation process. So that is what the importance of requirements validation process, right? So requirements checklist, what are those here is validity, consistency, right? Completeness, realism, right? Verifiability. So requirements validation techniques, there are various requirements validation techniques. What are those various requirements validation techniques that we'll discuss, right? So requirements reviews will be conducted. So what is the importance of conducting reviews? What is the purpose of conducting reviews? So when the project analyst directly goes to client company and gathering the requirements. These gather requirements might have contradiction in it, ambiguity in it. Some of the requirements might be incomplete. That's why what will take place here? Some reviews supposed to be conducted on this reviews. Is it? What exactly the purpose of reviews here? By conducting reviews, potential errors in the requirements will be detected, identified, so that the requirements, is it, the errors supposed to be discarded and the remaining requirements with that SRS document will be prepared, which will helpful for development of software system. That is what the purpose of conducting requirements reviews, to identify potential errors in the gathered requirements. That is what requirements validation techniques. And prototyping. Through requirements, building sample initial version of prototyping, again, which is given to the client, they'll evaluate, they'll give some more requirements. That's it. Again, without improved version of the prototype will be built, again evaluated by the client. With that, they are gathering some more requirements. This way, the more detailed requirements can be gathered from the client. That is what through prototyping and by building prototyping. Next is test case generation. We know what is meant by test case, right? So test case purpose here is whether the given requirements, whether it is based, whether it is producing the expected outcome or not, expected outcome. So here expected outcome and actual outcome. Once the test cases were generated, those will be executed. Once the test cases were executed, are those executed test cases, are those producing the expected outcome, and the expected outcome, is it matching actual outcome with expected outcome or not? If it is matching, test cases were passed. So that is what the importance of test case generation, right? Automatic consistency analysis, that is computer aided software engineering tools are used in requirements validation process. Next is of review checks. So what is the importance of review checks? That we'll discuss the importance of review checks. Verifiability. So what is the importance of verifiability? Is the requirements realistically testable or not? So verifiability importance here is verifiability. Is the requirements realistically testable or not? The requirements which is given by the client, are those realistically testable or not? That is what verifiability. Next one is of comprehensibility. So what is the importance of comprehensibility? Is the requirements properly understood or not? The requirements which is given by the client, are those properly understood by the development team or not? If the team is properly understood, so that they can develop the software system which can maintain quality and which can be developed based on the client expectations. So that is what comprehensibility means, understandability. Next is of traceability. Is the origin of the requirements clearly stated or not? So what is the origin? What is the source of the requirements? Source of the requirements, is it specified properly or not? That is what we call it as traceability. Next is of adaptability. So can the requirements be changed without an impact on other requirements or not? Right. Next is classification of requirements. So how the requirements were classified? So there are various types of requirements, classification of requirements. So first one is mutable requirements. So what is the importance of mutable requirements? Next one is of emergent requirements. Mutable requirements, emergent requirements. Next one is of consequential requirements, compatibility requirements, enduring requirements, volatile requirements. These are the various types of requirements. About these requirements, we will discuss in detail here, right? So classification of requirements: mutable, emergent, consequential, compatibility, enduring, volatile requirements. About this we will discuss. So what is the importance of this mutable requirements? That we will discuss. The importance of mutable requirements. Requirements that change due to the system environment, we call it as mutable requirements. Requirements that change due to the system's environment. Requirements that change due to the system environment, we call it as mutable requirements. Emergent requirements. Requirements that emerge as understanding of the system develops, that we call it as emergent requirements. So what's the importance of emergent requirements? Requirements that emerge as understanding of the system develops is called as emergent requirements. Consequential requirements. What is the importance of consequential requirements? Requirements that result as a consequence of the domain as computer system being used is called as consequential requirements. Compatibility requirements. Requirements at result prompt system changes, we call it as compatibility requirements. Enduring requirements, right? Requirements that are constant for a long period of time, we call them as enduring requirements. Next is of volatile requirements, requirements which change during development or when the system is in use, we call them as volatile requirements. So this is about various types of requirements. Narasimha.